Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over an updated forecast for that rainstorm which is going to be overtaking much of the eastern United States. We're going to have your rainfall forecast at the end of today's video, so make sure you're staying tuned all the way until the end, and we're also going to be timing this out for you guys, so we have a lot of information in today's video. Taking a look at the current National Weather Service page, you can see how we have some heat advisories in that orange color for parts of Idaho and Montana, as well as some excessive heat warnings also in parts of Montana and a little bit of Wyoming. We have some red flag warnings in that pink color for parts of Idaho, Oregon, and California, with some air quality alerts just kind of scattered all over the country, especially out west. We have a few flood watches in parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and also into Arkansas, as well as for a vast majority of the Northeast, where we also have some heat advisories still in place. Yesterday we had a high temperature of 119 degrees in Death Valley, California, with a low temperature of 28 degrees in Bodie, California. We had a highest rainfall report in Altoona, Kansas, where they got 5.65 inches of rainfall, and there were no snowfall reports as of yesterday. Taking a look at the current radar, and this would be as of around 10:20 a.m. Eastern time. You can see that we have some of that rainfall, mainly in thunderstorm, in the form of thunderstorms in parts of upstate New York into Pennsylvania and also through Ohio. So most of this, which is currently over southern Ontario, most of that steady and heavy rainfall was originally over northwestern Ohio and into central Indiana. They got clobbered with quite a bit of rainfall, right around 3+ inches in many of those areas. That is now going to be moving into parts of southern Ontario, so right along the northern coast of Lake Ontario, and that's going to then eventually move into parts of northern New York. So it looks like as this area moves to the northeast, which it has been doing over the past hour or so, this area in that black circle is probably going to be the next bullseye zone for the most rainfall, the steady rainfall, the convective activity, the thunderstorms are going to be on that southern end of things, which could take place over northern Pennsylvania, southern New York, who knows, maybe even into parts of New England. So that's an update on the current radar. And then if we look at the current risks of flash flooding, you can see that they have a marginal risk that goes from Arizona all the way up into parts of New Hampshire and Maine. And then we have a slight risk, which we have two areas. We have a little area for parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas, as well as another bigger area for the Northeast. And then we have a moderate 20 to 50% chance of flash flooding in that red color for parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So that's the area where we're expecting the most flooding. And that is somewhat due to this area already having a lot of rainfall over the past week. I believe they're somewhere near double the average weekly rainfall, even higher than that in some of these areas. So they already have saturated ground in those areas. It's not going to take as much to flood some of these spots. Also mixing that in with some of the urban locations, that could of course help with some flash flooding. So there are multiple different factors into this, and the fact that they're also going to get 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. So the already saturated ground, the active pattern we had last week with more rainfall on the way tonight into tomorrow, that's all kind of adding up, and that's why we have that moderate risk in effect for those areas for today. And then if we look at for tomorrow, you can see that we only have a marginal risk. We have a little area in parts of central New England and into central New York, as well as a bigger area all along the southeast and even into parts of the southern plains as well. So a fairly wide area of just a 5 to 10% chance of flash flooding. So not expecting a ton of flash flooding, although we could see it here and there in some isolated spots. And then if we look at for Monday, the flash flooding risk is still there for parts of the southeast where we have that marginal risk, and then we have a slight risk in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana for flash flooding. Taking a look at the forecasted radar, this is from the European model, so this is showing you where the heaviest of the rainfall is expected to be. We were seeing some of the scattered storms down through the southeast by later tonight, and then we're dealing with the kind of the heaviest batch in through parts of Ontario, New York, and even moving into Vermont later today. And that's going to be the area where we're expecting the most rainfall. We could even see a few of those areas get above 5 inches of rainfall if some of these models are correct. Taking a look at later tonight, so this would be around 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're dealing with a lot of storminess all along the eastern seaboard. Again, the bulk of that is going to be in upstate New York and into southern Ontario, where we have the heaviest batch of rainfall. The reason that is because we have a big low pressure in parts of western New York and into southeastern Ontario, and that's what's kind of producing the heaviest of the rainfall right there. Also, we're going to be dealing with this front kind of stalling out over these areas, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the reason that is because we have a low pressure, which is currently just a broad area of low pressure over Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and that's just kind of going to sit over there. So that's going to allow this front to stall out over the eastern United States, and that's one of the things that could lead to some more flash flooding, because we have this front just kind of stalling out over these areas for a couple days on end. So that is definitely one of the factors that we need to take into account. Looking at early tomorrow morning, we still have this low pressure moving in through the northeast. It's a fairly robust storm by this point, so we're dealing with some of these storms still going on. Again, the heaviest of the rainfall is going to be further to the north. More of the stormy and convective activity as you get further to the south into the coastal areas of the northeast. But again, as you get further to the north, it's going to be more of a steady rainfall with not too much thunder or lightning, but mostly just the rainfall and flash flooding being the biggest impact and risk. Taking a look at for Sunday morning, still we're dealing with some of that rainfall in the northeast. Lighter amounts than what we were dealing with before, but still you have a few bands, potentially in parts of New England, that could be dealing with rainfall rates of maybe even near a quarter to half an inch, which is actually fairly high. So we're dealing with fairly high values here in terms of the rainfall rates, and that's going to add on to whatever rainfall we already saw last week and even earlier this week. So looking at for Sunday in the early afternoon, still raining in many of these areas. We have more scattered thunderstorm activity into the southeast that's going to pop up Sunday afternoon. We have this low pressure kind of stalling out in the northeast, and again, the reason that is because we have a broader area of somewhat of a low pressure over southeastern Canada. It's actually moved on, and it's more over this area by this point. So here's your low pressure that was originally near Nova Scotia. Here's your low pressure in the northeast, and you can see that this one is kind of blocking it away from actually moving further to the east. So it's going to need to wait for this first low pressure right here to kind of move out of the way, and once that happens, eventually this low pressure over the northeast will be able to move out and will finally go into a bit of a drier period. Looking at Sunday evening, you're dealing with still rainfall in parts of the northeast, but it is kind of tapering off a little bit. Still quite heavy in parts of Maine and into parts of Nova Scotia as well. So we're still dealing with some isolated pockets of that heavy rainfall. Moving into early Monday mornings, this is around 2 a.m. Eastern on Monday morning. That low pressure is now into eastern New England, and eventually it will be moving out further to the east, and we will eventually go into a drier pattern. Still some storminess in parts of the southeast, so you guys are going to be dealing with kind of just steady thunderstorm activity every afternoon over the next couple of days. That's where you're going to get the bulk of your rainfall from. If we look at Monday morning, still dealing with some of that heavy rainfall in northern New England and into upstate New York. You can see how this storm is still stalling out. We have that high pressure, which is to its southeast. We still have that storm, which is back over here and you can see that it's really not able to move too much over this time period. By Tuesday, it'll eventually start to kind of move a little bit further to the east, and we'll finally see some of this rain taper off. By the way, some parts of northern New York, northern Vermont, and even into parts of southern Ontario, by this point, if this were to kind of plan out from what the model is showing, would have already been seeing rainfall for over 72 hours. So we've been dealing with rainfall from late last night into early this morning in those areas, and that's only going to continue even through Monday afternoon, maybe even into Tuesday morning. So you're looking at maybe a 3 to even 3.5 or 4 day time period where you're dealing with steady, at least moderate rainfall, at times even heavy rainfall. So that's where you're going to get the bulk of your accumulation. Or it's going to be a steady rainfall. You're not going to see too many downbursts of really, really heavy rainfall all at once. But the fact that this is going to be happening at in the same area for maybe 3 or 4 days, that's where you're going to get the flooding risks and concerns, and that's why some of these areas could even see above 5 or 6 inches of rainfall, unfortunately. And looking at Tuesday morning, still we have that low pressure up in Maine by this point. We still see some storms down through the southeast, but again, this storm is really not moving by this point. By Tuesday afternoon, it'll eventually start to kind of get a move on. If we look at Tuesday in the early afternoon, still we have the storm. By this point, it's in right over here, but we're now starting to see sort of another front developing right behind it, and that's unfortunately going to give us even more rainfall. So by this point, we're dealing with maybe even 4 days on end with rainfall in these areas. That front is going to kind of sweep by to the south. We have that low pressure to the north, which is kind of carrying this front. So everything is just going to slide on to the east. You can see that eventually these areas are getting kind of the tapering last bits of rainfall, and after 4 or 5 days of non-stop continuous rainfall in parts of the interior northeast, eventually we'll be kind of done with this, and we'll go into a bit of a drier pattern. Luckily, there aren't as many storms expected after this big one moves through, but we're already into Wednesday by this point, so half the week's gone, and we're barely getting out of that rainy pattern, and then that storm completely goes away by early Thursday morning. So luckily, by Thursday at least, we'll be into a little bit of a drier pattern. We're going to see maybe 5 or 6 inches in a few of these areas. Looking at some of these models, we have a few pockets, especially again within this area, which really got hammered according to this model, which we've seen that continuous onslaught of rainfall. 5, 6, 7, who knows, maybe even more inches of rainfall are possible. In that red color, that's where we're looking at 2 to 5 inches of rainfall, and you can see that covers a good swath of the northeast. That rainfall in parts of Indiana and western Ohio, that was from this is a model run that ran earlier this morning, so some of that rain was still ongoing by that point. That's kind of not even into the equation anymore, so you can kind of X that out. If you live in that part of Indiana or Ohio, you're not really expecting too much more extra rainfall. You can also see that in the southeast, we're expecting maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 inches in a few of these spots of rainfall, especially in the same areas that continue to get hammered with those thunderstorms day after day. It's going to be very different than what's happening in the northeast. It's not going to be that steady rainfall. In the southeast, you're actually going to get decent breaks in between rainfall. You're going to see the breaks mainly in the evening and in the early morning hours. Then you go into the afternoon, you get your thunderstorms for the day. After that passes, then you go into a bit of a drier spell for, let's say, 18 hours, and then you go back into another area of storminess. So it's going to be more from the afternoon showers that you get most of your rainfall. So it's not going to be in the kind of steady manner that the northeast is going to get it, but still it will add up. After 5 or 6 days, you're still looking at maybe 1 or 2, and again maybe even 3 inches of rainfall in some of these spots. Taking a look at my forecast, this is going from today through Wednesday, and this is covering a good majority of the country. So even areas that we didn't cover, I'll still put in their rainfall forecast for my viewers who aren't in the eastern half of the country. Under an inch of rainfall for this entire area. So that pretty much covers everywhere except for in parts of the northern Rockies and northern plains on some parts of the Great Lakes. But for the vast majority of you guys, we're expecting at least some amount of rainfall, even a very tiny amount expected in these areas. 1 to 2 inches of rainfall for parts of I'll start going from west to east. So we have one little area in central Arizona that's in some of the higher elevations, so they'll get a little bit of extra rainfall. We have another spot in parts of near Lake Superior in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan. And then also we have another area in parts of the central and southern plains as well as the southeast, and then one more area for the northeast where we're expecting 1 to 2 inches or even more of rainfall in these spots. At least 2 to 3 inches of rainfall is expected anywhere in this dark green color for parts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, as well as another area in parts of Georgia and the Carolinas, and one more area for parts of Pennsylvania, New York, all of Vermont, and New Hampshire, as well as western Maine. So that's generally where I'm expecting at least 2 inches of rainfall. It's going to be in the southeast, mainly confined again to the coastal areas, as well as some parts of the central Gulf states. And then in the northeast, it's going to be mainly confined to areas that are away from the coast or at least that are in northern New England. And then if we look at the area that I'm expecting 3 to 5 inches, we have a little spot in eastern Texas. Most of the models have at least 3 inches. It's probably going to be on the lower end, so I would expect maybe 3 or 4 inches within that area. And then the area up in upstate New York and northern Vermont, I'm expecting at least 3 inches. Most of these areas will be up near 4 or 5 inches, especially as you get further north, closer to the Canadian border, and as you get into the northern Adirondacks, especially where you're going to get really hit with these storms. And I even put in a 5 to 8 inch area. I'm not expecting 8 inches, but I think maybe 5 or 6 inches is definitely possible in parts of northern New York, especially into the central and northern Adirondacks. You get a little bit of lift and you get a little bit of elevation. It makes it a little bit easier to get some heavier amounts of rainfall. So luckily, this area isn't too urbanized, so we're not dealing with any urban flooding. It's much easier to flood a city than it is to flood a forest, so definitely that's good news. We're going to see most of that drain into the local lakes and streams. We aren't expecting too much of a big flooding risk in this area, despite the high amounts of rainfall that we're expecting, just because it's going to be over a very long period. So it's going to go over 4 or 5 days where we're getting 5 inches to 6 inches. So you're looking at maybe an inch or inch and a half per day. Still will make the road conditions a little bit poor, but in terms of flash flooding, not expecting too much of that in these areas, just because we're not expecting these big downbursts all at once. We're expecting it to kind of be more of a steady thing. But you definitely do want to check in with your local emergency services, kind of just check out the roads before you are going to drive through them. If you do see a flooded road, definitely don't go through it, because you really don't know how deep that's going to be. And you only need about half a foot to a foot of rainfall of standing water to carry a full-blown SUV. So you can carry a car with a relatively little amount of water. So definitely turn around, don't drown is the common phrase, and it's definitely applicable for these areas where we're expecting closer to 5 or 6 inches of rainfall over the next couple of days. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.